A big part of the challenge of writing informational nonfiction is how do I make complex, sometimes very niche material into something that can be read by a layman? Not only read, but enjoyed. That's kind of the point of books. The point of a book, instead of like a course or a textbook, is that you're trying to educate but also inform. With some types of nonfiction, specifically informational or educational nonfiction, that can be a challenge. The more technical the material, the more difficult it can get. That's why, as you're going through a nonfiction book, you may find yourself confronted with anecdotes from the author's life. The reason they do this is they're trying to zhuzh it up, I guess you could say. But then that means you're going to be accused of adding fluff. Oh, this is padded. This could have been a blog post. This could have been an email. This is a cash grab. I'm so disappointed in you, says anonymous person on the internet. The good news for you is that there are actually ways, one in particular that we're going to be discussing today, to make your informational, perhaps complex, nonfiction book into something that people are clamoring to read. What is it? Use an avatar. No, not that one. No, not that one, sir. Let's find out what kind. Hello, shameless writers. I'm Kristen McTiernan, the nonsense-free editor, here for your somewhat kinda regular dose of writing wisdom. I admit I have not been great about making videos these days, but on the bright side, a lot of you are hiring me based on the videos that you see. Hence, more time spent on your book and less time spent on my videos. It's a good payoff for both of us, I think. Today, we're going to be discussing how to use an avatar in your nonfiction book and using two fairly different nonfiction books to kind of illustrate the point. Using an avatar within your nonfiction is basically creating a fictional character undergoing fictional scenarios that illustrate the point that you are trying to make. One of the most famous books to kind of set the world on fire with this particular technique that's kind of hot right now with the productivity gurus is called The Courage to be Disliked. I loved this book. I heard about it on Ali Abdaal's channel, and I said to myself, I must read this. I absolutely must. And it was marvelous. I'm so glad that I read it. I listen to it frequently. I don't often re-listen to books. I do re-listen to this one. Now, why did it resonate with me so much? Part of it was the subject matter. It delves into the sometimes complex and perhaps counterintuitive ideas of Adlerian psychology. Here in the West, we kind of have been indoctrinated into Freudian psychology. If you go to see a therapist, any kind of therapist, chances are they're going to be using the concepts pioneered by Freud. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that that's kind of the school of thought that we in the West have most intensely gravitated to. Now, Alfred Adler was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. At the time of his being alive, his theories did get a fair bit of attention. However, they didn't really catch on here. Why is this interesting? In a way, it kind of isn't. If you personally need therapy, you're going to go see a therapist. And probably as a layman, you're not going to be super interested in the different schools of thought. Psychologists are very interested in this. But The Courage to be Disliked is not targeted at clinical psychiatrists. It's targeted at you and me, people who are just regular laymen and people who may not be interested in therapy at all. But oh, that title. If we saw that title and picked up that book, we would be mighty disappointed to start reading about psychological theory and perhaps Alfred Adler's life history. We'd be like, this is not what I was promised with that title and that cover. What is this? In order to get around this quandary, author Ichiro Kishimi used an avatar. Actually, he used two. He basically wrote us a story of a young, brash young man kind of unhappy with his life. And he goes to seek out a wise old man, a scholar. And the young man needed wisdom. So he goes to go see him. When he goes to see him, the old man explains in very intricate detail what exactly Adlerian psychology is and what it teaches. Some of these are considered very controversial these days. For instance, there's no such thing as trauma. You are behaving the way you're behaving, not because of what happened to you, but because you like the effects of your behavior. You like people paying attention to you. You like being left alone, etc., etc. Now, I can feel you pulling away from me. This is not my point of view. But it is, to an extent, a point of view that I deeply resonated with. And I wouldn't really have been able to get through the book if it was structured like a textbook or even a traditional nonfiction book where the author just kind of talks to you like he's having a chat with you. Maybe there are tables and graphs. Okay, well, Freudian psychology preaches this, but Adlerian psychology teaches this. I still would have zoned out because partly because of my job. I see so many of these. I write so many of these. I'm over it. I don't want to do it. But because he was telling me a story about the conflict between an old man who is just very calm, he knows what he knows, he's lived a long life, and he's certainly not perfect, and a young man who is brash and kind of obsessed with himself, like young people are. It's an age-appropriate response. And through this youth, he pushes back on Adlerian psychology, kind of the same thing that you or I, as a Westerner who's been most familiar with Freudian psychology, would say. He disagrees with the old philosopher. The old philosopher replies. Now, this is translated from the Japanese, so the dialogue is very formal. It's not really the way actual people here in the US speak. It might be the way people in Japan speak to each other. They are civil. They are not feral like we are. Kudos, Japan. But even with that formal kind of back and forth repartee, it's riveting. You could read it in one sitting. For me, I listened to the audiobook, which I highly recommend. It was excellent. However, writing a full-fledged story around your subject matter might not be good for you, either just because you as the author, you don't want to, it's not really your skill set, that's not how you best communicate. That's okay. There's another book that kind of splits the difference. Misled by Alan Parr is a treatise against, how do I say this? Progressive Christianity. It's basically looking at modern churches and the way that they have moved away from biblical truths. The way he does this is he splits the difference. He starts off the chapter by saying, here is the problem with many mainline Protestant churches in the United States. They teach this, but it goes against biblical teachings in this way. He instructs us, and then he goes to a story of a young man who is looking for a new church home. But every church that he goes to in each of these chapters, he encounters the problem that Alan Parr is describing within that chapter. And then we can see how it affects this young man. It affects his faith. Oh, I was raised believing this. Is that not true? Oh, well, what this, Christian pastor is telling me, that seems actually to line up more to New Age. So am I even in the right faith? By inserting this character in small doses in only a portion of the chapter, Alan Parr kind of eases us in. He lets us know, okay, well, we're going to be talking about a serious subject matter. This is the subject matter that we're talking about in this chapter. And then he kind of lets us relax. Relax, enjoy this story, and see how a young college-age guy might interact in a church home. He does this, from what I can see, for two reasons. One, it's an approachable thing. He's not saying that people who worship or believe this way are bad. They're not evil. They're not out to steal your soul. They're probably good people trying to do good things. But if you are a believer in the Christian faith, that is a unique and in some ways exclusive thing. And Parr's book is designed to split the difference. If you were raised in one of these churches that is in error, he wants to show you that you're not a bad person. You're not evil. You haven't gone astray. You've just been incorrectly taught. And especially when it comes to religion, yeah, some people don't like that, do they? Inserting the character of the avatar allows this more gentle instruction. The narrative was the longest part of the chapter where we followed our avatar on his journey to find a church home and feeling frustrated because he wasn't finding what he was looking for. So we were able to have that narrative information sandwich. It worked pretty well. Full disclosure, Alan Parr's book is not as skillfully written as some others, but his main job is that of a YouTuber. He's a preacher. I think he does other work in the entertainment sphere as well, but his main career is not as an author, and I fully believe he absolutely wrote this himself. I don't think he used a ghostwriter, so we'll forgive him. But that's the thing. A lot of nonfiction authors, they're not full-time authors. They are just knowledgeable, intelligent people who know some niche information that probably the general public doesn't, because who has time to study something that in-depth? The author does. And the great thing about using an avatar is that you get to communicate that niche, in-depth knowledge to people who would never have heard about it otherwise. And you're entertaining them while you do it. If you feel like you need a sounding board and other nonfiction authors to kind of read over your work and let you know if you're on the right track, I have good news for you with today's sponsor. The sponsor is predictably me and my critique group, Inkcrafters Critique. Inkcrafters was designed for authors by authors, where we can get together, submit our material in small chunks, usually about 2,000 words at a time, up to 3 times a week, and get feedback from our fellow authors from a variety of genres. So that means if you want to have an avatar nonfiction book, you're going to be getting feedback not only from other nonfiction authors like memoirists, but you're also going to be getting feedback from actual fiction authors who will be able to tell you if you're constructing your avatar story correctly. You will also be getting feedback directly from me, as I am a member and administrator of the group. If this sounds like something you'd like, there's a link in the description. Come on, take a look, and maybe join us if it sounds right for you. So that's all I have for this week. Until next week, or maybe next month, I'm not sure. We'll see. I'm so busy, you guys. But whenever I get back to you, I will talk to you then, and I am looking forward to it. And until then, take care and write well.